with that, we move on to our next session. We discussed about ecosystems, we discussed about digital assets, we talked about super apps. The next most important conversation is around cybersecurity. And we are, as banks, you are the guardians of trust. You have a huge opportunity. We trust the banks more than we trust many of the technology companies because you have a lot of our data. But how do you keep it secure? How do you keep it secure at the same time? Don't let it make an experience that has got too much friction. And to have that conversation, I'm delighted to have James Tin here. James is the Senior Director of Global Security and Fraud Solutions at F5. James, thank you very much for joining us. And prior to his experience at F5, where he's managing and advising a wide variety of banks, James himself worked in the financial services industry. So you have a real first-hand feel as a practitioner in keeping banks safe and secure. So great to have you with us, James.
Thank you so much for having me on board, Manoj. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. So James, as you are now talking to a wide variety and cross section of customers from across the region. What do you think are the biggest priority and challenges from a cybersecurity standpoint that the big banks in this region are currently working on or dealing with?
Well, there's quite a few, isn't there? Especially with the drought in cybersecurity skills. So there's a lot of attacks that unfortunately are leveraged by the attackers, which get through a lot of the traditional security controls, like the web application firewall, anti-fraud controls. The more advanced controls, these attacks are getting through. So good examples are like credential stuffing. And we've had some customers who had abuse of the forget password function. And so the forget password function is a completely legitimate way for a customer to get access back into their account that they may have forgotten the password, but the attackers are leveraging this. And it's hard from the bank's perspective to determine which one is a good request and which one is a bad request using traditional controls. And so with the more recent breaches that we've had in the region with 9 million username and passwords and driver's licenses and passport identification numbers being lost, then I predict that there will be an uptick in new account creations which are fraudulent against banks because all of the know your customer and anti-money laundering controls that the banks have, because the person's now got all the correct information, they'll be able to sign up accounts, and it's going to be a little bit tricky.
So are the current security compliance standards, which are currently in place, are they good enough for the banks and financial institutions?
Well, there's a saying in security that compliance does not equal security, because you might have a particular control in place, but unless it is well managed and kept up to date and patched, then there's ways for it to get through. So I think it's the attackers are leading the defenders at this stage. The defenders need to dramatically increase their cybersecurity maturity before we can be in a good position to prevent a lot of fraud and attacks getting through. Having said that, going back to the super apps discussion just now, the customers are telling me that all the fraud is occurring on the web interface. Now, with the adoption of mobile devices, they're seeing that there's very little to no fraud on the app space. And so for digital banks pushing towards apps and super apps, it's a much better ecosystem because you have control of the endpoint now. You can now define what is on the app and what is allowed to get through rather than a untrusted Windows or Linux or Apple device where there could be malware and other things, keyloggers on the client's machine.
Correct. And if there are any questions for James, please do put it in the comments and Q&A, and we would be happy to take it. Appreciate that. So I think, James, good point. On one end, we want to keep it secure. At the same time, you heard from the earlier discussions today be it the super app or be it the ecosystem conversation, the future of banking is really about embedding it seamlessly, frictionlessly into our existing journeys, right? The less the friction, the more easy is it for consumers to consume, right? So where is the opportunity for a bank to innovate on customer experience? How to take away that friction? What technologies are available? How can you take away that friction and yet keep it secure and safe, and also open up opportunities to serve segments that have traditionally not been able to serve, because we have been so risk averse. We are so much worried about fraud and risk.
Yeah, so often things like multi-factor authentication is used to confirm that the user is actually Manoj, let's say. But what we're finding is that MFA actually stands for more friction authentication. It becomes very difficult for the end user now to do banking. But what the founders of the Shape Security that was acquired by F5, they were ex-Googlers, and they were protecting Google's online assets and accounts. And so what they created was an ability to do transparent multi-factor authentication. So leverage the way that a human interacts with a web page or a mouse or a movement, or how they type in words and passwords into the keyboard, leverage biometrics, behavioral analytics, and leverage ML and AI to then notice the difference between a good user and a bad user, so that we can allow the good users to come through and only send MFA requests to users that we're not sure of or fraudulent. So often security teams might have a metric that they look at, which is called the number of completion, the completion rate for MFA. And people might think, oh, above 90% is really good. But what that actually means is you're actually bludgeoning your legitimate users with so much friction that they get really frustrated with it. What we found is the ideal ratio is about 7%. So we're able to save the users who are legitimate users, but they may have forgotten their password, or they don't have their token on with them, or they don't have access to their mobile phone right now. We can save those users and allow them to get seamless access into your application by transparently doing multi-factor authentication. So you're not lowering your security, you're maintaining or actually increasing your level of security, but also increasing the user experience and driving down the fraud. So it's a win-win-win for multiple parties in this environment.
Excellent. So essentially 93% of us should get a better friction-free experience as we experience banking and financial or payment services moving forward, as this technology becomes more mainstream. Yeah.
100%. So that could integrate with your Face ID. That could integrate with a biometric on your mobile device. But have a look at, when was the last time you logged into, let's say, www.amazon.com. You type in that URL and you go straight into your account. And so what we've been able to work with our customers with is we can extend the session timeout window from minutes to hours to days to weeks to even months. And we can actually see an increase in revenue that they're able to generate because of the increased user experience for the user. And they spend more time on the website, then hence they're able to generate more revenue from those users.
There is a question. So, James, building on that point, we are seeing newer digital banks, aggressively adopt public cloud. This, potentially widens the threat surface. So, can you comment on the concept of cloud edge or centralized security and visibility?
Absolutely. A lot of the banks in my region, in particular in Australia, are looking to go cloud first. So they want to leverage the cloud providers so they don't have to build out data centers. They want to exit data centers. They want to move core banking into the cloud. But what happens if one of the cloud providers goes offline, or there's internet connectivity? Then there's thousands of users and thousands of other organizations using that cloud service are also offline. So what we're able to do is actually be a shim in the cloud that provides global server load balancing and high availability of your cloud. So we can actually load balance between clouds. So we can say active across Azure, AWS, and your physical data centers. So that increases availability. It increases data resiliency. It also means that the attack surface is no longer at their perimeter of their data center. The attack surface is now at the perimeter of F5's distributed cloud platform. And so the attacks will actually stop outside your infrastructure and possibly even in the source country of where the attacks are coming from. So the earlier that you can stop the attack, the less problems that these DDoS attacks and application layer attacks cause on the intermediary internet links coming to your data center. So doing all the security controls at your data center might be okay, but then if your link is inundated, then you're essentially offline as well. So we need to leverage our security controls and put them into multiple cloud edge points. And that's what we're seeing a lot of the banking and financial services in my region, and as well as across APJ, they're leveraging these cloud resources.
Yeah, the last question, or maybe we have a little bit more time, which is, so, we talked about open banking, we are talking about API enabled banking. So how are we supporting the banks? Because increasingly, many banks will end up working and driving more business through partnerships than through traditional banking transactions, right? So how does that play in, and how should banks go about doing it? How is F5 supporting it?
Sure. So F5 purchased a company called NGINX, or an open source platform called NGINX actually, and that's the market leading API gateway. And so on top of that, we've built an API web application firewall, and we've also built on API bot management, as well as anti-fraud capabilities. So we've got this really strong ecosystem to be able to publish your APIs securely, do the authentication, confirm that it's a legitimate device coming in or application coming in, and not a fraudster trying to simulate all the headers and all the requests from a mobile device. And additionally, what was I going to say? Yeah, sorry. Continue, Manoj. I think
no worries. I think you were talking. Yeah, you were talking about how banks can secure especially as they work through APIs, and you have acquired the company to help you enable and deliver these manage third-party APIs more efficiently.
Yeah, exactly. Securely publish them to the internet, and hopefully not be exposed to some of the more recent attacks that we saw here, where there was an unauthenticated API exposed to the internet with production data in a test environment inside one of the cloud providers. There's a lot of best practices that we can help the customer to ensure that you can publish applications to a test environment directly to the internet, but we want to be able to authenticate and provide single sign-on to that. So only legitimate users and testers are allowed to get access to that test environment, and not directly expose it to the internet. But you still get all the benefits of doing your SDK testing and all of the other testing that you need when it's connected to the internet.
Excellent. So a last quick short question, which is, the banks have a huge opportunity to be the custodians of our trust, right? We inherently, because the banks have maybe not abused the data that they have on us as much, but as they move towards this new era, so what is your general opinion about banks leveraging that opportunity and positioning themselves well to capture this opportunity? Maybe a quick final comment from you on this, James.
Yeah, sure. That's a common thread that's been going through this webinar, and I have 2 points for that. The first one is, a lot of the older folks that use banking, when they do internet banking and the website's offline, customers have told me that they get a lot of calls coming into the help desk saying, "Oh, the website's offline? Has my money been stolen?" So they think the bank's been robbed when the website's offline. The second anecdote there is, I've forgotten. Someone yelled out in the background, and I've forgotten my point of.
Hey, this is today's hybrid world reality, so no problem at all.
Yeah. So just repeat the question, the second bit of the question again.
Yeah, and then the question was about how well are the banks positioning themselves to
Trust. Yes. Sorry,
to
my apologies.
to be the provider of trust, and leveraging that opportunity to serve consumers beyond even banking into other lifestyle services as well.
Absolutely. The banks have a really high brand awareness. So, for instance, I'm with a particular bank in Australia, and I've been with this bank since I was 5 years old. They gave me an account in kindergarten, so it's got very fond thoughts in my mind, and security is such a big component of that. I believe it would be fantastic if the banks created a security awareness training, so that they do a little bit of this already, but some of the smaller banks don't, and even some of the smaller banks, they called up my wife, for instance, and said that they were from a bank that I used 2 years ago, and they asked for her, date of birth and all of her details for an incoming call into her mobile. And that's ticking all the flags that's
Yeah,
a phishing request. These banks shouldn't be doing that. They
yeah.
should provide a number that my wife can call up, and then it's an outbound call to the bank rather than an inbound call that could have been from anyone. So these security awareness trainings, I think the banks are in a fantastic position to sign up to a cloud-based security awareness training, and then push that out to their customers. And you can have your bank logos on there, and give examples of how the bank is addressing some of the fraud and some of the attacks that they're seeing. That builds a lot of confidence and trust that they've already got, but it pushes it even further. And then consumers will love to continue banking with that organization because they believe that everything they're doing will be secure.
Fabulous. Hey, thank you very much, James, to help and support us to wade through this as we talk about immense growth opportunities coming through new kinds of business models. Security continues to be one of the biggest underlying challenges that banks need to deal with. So, thank you for sharing your perspectives and helping us understand that a bit better. So, appreciate that.
Thank you, Manoj. My pleasure.